and control in this world. So in Krishna consciousness and Bhakti Yoga, when we begin studying Bhagavad Gita, we really discover, first of all, that our nature, our actual ontology, is to be very minute spirit soul, conscious beings, part and parcel of the Supreme Spirit, who is Krishna, person. And everything that we have, whether it's our own body, the means to maintain the body, such as food and shelter, the air, everything, is actually coming from God, coming from Krishna. As Srila Prabhupada would like to point out, we haven't created these bodies. We don't maintain them. If any of us would be asked, well, can you please explain how your food is being digested with all the details? Who knows? We feel hungry, we eat some prasad, we honor some prasad, and we get some energy. We don't know anything. This is all given to us. The whole material world, just like today, I've been coming to this festival for 7 years, and these 2 days have been the most exquisite weather. Not too hot, not too cold, no big wind blowing off of the water. You know, in previous years, many of you have come here, rain, right? It gets cold in the evening. I once had to buy a coat over there because it was so cold, you know. But somehow, this is idyllic, you know. So this is a gift. We can't control it. So this is a primary understanding when we begin the process of Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga, to realize our dependence on God. I remember in 1976, I was working with Back to Godhead magazine. I was one of the editors during the 70s. In 1976, of course, is not that big a date here, but in south of the border, this is the 200th anniversary of the independence of the United States. You know, every July 4th, Independence Day. So it happened that 1976 was 200. So Prabhupada actually was in Washington at the time. He wanted to see the fireworks, and they took him to see the fireworks. And I think he said something, is this all there is? You know, he wasn't that impressed. Once you've seen Krishna and you understand Krishna's glories, not much about this material world can really shock you or impress. But anyway, Prabhupada gave a talk. I don't know if it was at that time or close to that time. And the theme was, and we gave it a title because we used this for the Back to Godhead lecture, the Prabhupada lecture. Every Back to Godhead has a talk by Prabhupada at the beginning, declaring our dependence on God, because we wanted America declared independence of the king, right? And there's a war, revolutionary war. Okay, but really, how much independence did you have? You know, we may be independent of the king now. Okay, now England can't call the shots, but we're so dependent on everything, the air, the sunshine, the temperature. If it's a little too hot, we become dysfunctional. A little too cold, we freeze. Not too much water, flooding. Not enough water, drought. You see? So all of these conditions, and day to day, and breath to breath, these are actually gifts. They're gifts that have been given to us. And so the first step, really, in God realization, in understanding who we are and what our relationship to this environment is to realize our fragility, our dependence. And soon we learn, by reading Bhagavad Gita and other books of knowledge and hearing from great saints like Srila Prabhupada, that the supply is being given by the Supreme Person. It's not just being given by nature. Nature is working under the control of a superior intelligence. Just like a child may see a car driving down the road, right? Doesn't know anything. And as far as the child knows, that car is no different than the dog. The dog is running and the car is running. And so he thinks it has this independent volition. But in truth, we know there's a driver. Even though the car is so complicated a machine, we know that there has to be an intelligent person driving that machine in order for it to do anything. So this whole world is like a huge machine. It's very complicated. Our bodies are also part of that, and they're independent little machines, right? So just as we don't know how this body is working, but we know that if we leave the body, if the soul is out of the body, the machine is all there, but it doesn't work. Nothing happens. It just degrades, right? That's called death. So similarly, this whole universe is working under the superintendence of Krishna. And he says so in Bhagavad Gita. Very important verse. Maya Dyakshena Prakati Suryate Sachadachadam Hetunanena Konteya Jagat Vipati Vartate. The words Jagat Vipati Vartate literally mean that the universe, Jagat, we're worshipping Jagannath. Krishna is Jagannath. He's the Lord of the Jagat. Means that he controls everything. Every blade of grass, not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Lord. Right? And the same thing holds true for us. Everything is Maya Jakshit. I mean, by my superior supervision, Prakriti is creating this, all of this universe, the universes, planets, everything, bodies, and it's also working from moment to moment by his supervision. That's why he expands as super soul. Within every atom, within every heart, is a manifestation of Krishna. And he's overseeing, maintaining. What do we mean when we say that Shiva or Brahma creates, Vishnu maintains, and Shiva destroys? We've seen Khandava Nritya, right? So Shiva and Brahma, they're not on the level of Vishnu. So the maintenance, which is the hardest thing, you can build something. Suppose you build a school, start a school. But the school will come to nothing if it's not maintained. And somebody can come and easily bulldoze down that school. So creation and destruction are much simpler and easier than maintenance. So maintenance is in the charge of Vishnu, in the form of the Paramatma. And Paramatma gives intelligence. It says, Sarvasya Chaham Vidisanda Vishnu Matak Smatir Jnanam Apohanangsha. That Krishna says, I'm in everyone's heart as a super soul, and I give knowledge, I give forgetfulness and remembrance as well. And he also says, Upadrashta Anumantacha Bharta Bhokta Maheshwara. He says the same thing, that I'm the overseer and the maintainer of everything. So if Krishna is the maintainer, it's like if we're children, right? You're being maintained. Somebody, your parents are buying your food and maintaining you and giving you a nice place to live and giving you love, So we should be grateful. The child who's not grateful is called an ingrate, right? Ingrate, there's a word. And that's not a very nice attitude to have. You don't appreciate. If someone gives you a gift, you can give a thank. My mother always taught me, you have to send a thank you note, Your aunt gave you $5, send a thank you note. So we develop that attitude, I'm not just, consuming here. I'm dependent, and I should reciprocate the friendliness or the attitude of love. That's good. So this is a kind of one of the first steps in God realization. Now, what's interesting is this idea of gratitude is also tied up with a sense of indebtedness. Right? It's a little more official, let's say, indebtedness, but there is this give and take idea. So one of the things is that from the Vedic culture, we understand that, Krishna's representatives also, we owe them. Just like it says, Devarshi Bhutata Nrinam Patrinam Nakinkadonayam Rini Chara. The word Rini means a debtor. So just when we're born in this world, we're indebted. And they enumerate. The Devas, just like we have the sun god. The sun is not just glowing up there. There's an intelligent being who's maintaining the sun and causing the heat and the light to bless us. Not too hot, not too cold, right? It's coming. The moon god. So these are Devas. What about Varuna? Where would we be without the waters? The nice breeze, the air. You see, there's gods behind that. There's nowhere where there is an intelligent design, where there is an intelligence of it. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that you should see everything around you as a combination of two energies of his. The spiritual energy, the conscious energy, the soul, and the lower energy. Earth, water, fire, everything. This chair is not a conscious being. But the earth in general is being controlled by a god or goddess, Bhumi. There's a god for the air. The air doesn't just blow and exist. Vayu is in charge of the air. Varuna is in charge of the water. Surya is in charge of the sun. Chandra is in charge of the moon. So we need all these things. So therefore we're indebted as soon as we're born. That's why it's meant to, if you don't worship Krishna, you better worship the gods. You know, because if you don't recognize their supremacy, you're a thief. This is also in the Gita. And if you're a thief, then you get punished. Sinful activity. So also, what about the rishis? What about those who give us knowledge? On a more mundane level, we go to school, we have our teachers, our parents teach us so many things. Where would we be without learning how to read and all of these things? So we owe a debt. We owe a debt to our teachers. And people in general. No man is an island. We depend on so many. So the Devarshi Bhutapta, our relatives, people in general, the forefathers, we come into this world as debtors. And if we don't recognize the debt, gratitude, and try to repay it in some way, then we get punished. But the wonderful thing about this verse is that Devarshi Bhutapta Rinamatinam Nakinkaro Nayam Rini Charajan Sarvatmanayak Sharanam Shadanyam Gato Mukundam Padiditikartam. If we surrender to Krishna, if we become Krishna's devotees and we recognize our debt to Krishna as the ultimate giver and supervisor of all these others, then all the other debts are liquidated. Just like if you develop so many debts on your credit cards, right? You have a whole wallet of credit cards, right? And it's becoming a hassle to pay. You know, they're calling you up. You know, they're getting into your bank accounts, whatever. You know. Says, okay, I go to a credit advisor and we consolidate all the debts. And now I just have to make one payment a month. And then the other guys they can't call you anymore. You see what I'm saying? So it's just like that. If we just recognize that one debt to Krishna and become his devotee and try to serve him with as much of our body, mind, words, and property as possible, then we don't owe anybody anything. It's all resolved. We don't have to worry about the gods. You know the story of Krishna lifting Govardhan? It's very instructive, right? So Nanda Maharaj, he was a traditional agriculturist there in India 5,000 years ago. And what do the farmers need more than anything else? Timely rain. At the right time, not too much, not So, little Krishna, he comes in and the elders of Vrindavan are getting ready to perform this opulent sacrifice for Indra. Indra's in charge of the rain. So they had all of the paraphernalia, all the ghee was collected, the grains, the brahmins were all set, you know. And this was a traditional sacrifice that they'd always performed from time immemorial. So little Krishna comes and he says, "Oh my dear father, what kind of sacrifice are you getting ready to do?" Nice to see you. And so his father was thinking, well, he's only 8 years old, or 7 years old, and what will he really understand? It's like if you sit down, in America we have the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, you know. So the father is making out his tax form, and the little boy comes and, "Father, what are you doing?" You know, how could the boy understand all of the deductions and everything? So he put him to say, "Well, you know, we'll tell you later. You know, you don't really need to know." But Krishna insisted. What kind of that? So he explained to him. So Krishna, he started speaking atheism in order to discourage his father. He said, "What can Indra do? He's just like a functionary. He's just like an employee in a bureaucracy. You don't have to worship the employee. You just have to, you know, do the right thing, and then they have to give you the result." So he's saying that just do your job as a proper Vaishya, and then Indra has to give you the grains. You don't have to do all this worship. And so his father was saying, no, we'll do it, you know. And so Krishna said, "No, the best thing you do, you worship this Govardhan hill and the cows and the Brahmins. Is it? And everything will be taken care of. I'll be very happy also." So the upshot was that Krishna always, you know, they loved him so much that, okay, we'll do that. It's a big chance. It's like the father rips up the tax return and says, "Okay, we'll do what you say," knowing that the IRS is not going to be very happy. But Nanda was so much in love with Krishna that he says, "Okay." So what happened? So they performed this wonderful Govardhan Puja, circumambulate the hill, and the chanting Hare Krishna. The hill itself is a manifestation of Krishna, and they cook. The big thing about Govardhan Leela is you cook mountains of prasad and feed everybody. It's called Annapurna, I think, or Anakuta. So they did that, feeding everybody, from the Brahmins down to the dogs. Everybody feasted on and everyone is very blissful, except for Indra. Indra wasn't happy, is it? So he was covered, and he started, he wanted to punish the coward community. So he sent a terrible storm. Rain and hail the size of basketballs. You know, it was great danger to the cows, and this flooding was going on. And so what are the Brijbasis going to do? You know, did they call the weather service? Did they call the FEMA? No. They called Krishna. Krishna, save us, help us. We have no shelter but you. So Krishna, little Krishna, 7-year-old, he lifts up the Govardhan hill. Now, Krishna is so intelligent, he's expert, he does several things at one time. So, number one, he humiliated Indra, and so that Indra could understand who's really the boss, who's really in charge. Indra is not, you know, in charge of the weather, really Krishna is. And he enlivened all of his friends. He kept them under the hill for 7 days. You know, they had not all had his association in such an extended time for so long. So that was very ecstatic. He protected them and brought it down. But the lesson is that if you worship Krishna nicely, you learn to love Krishna, then he provides everything for you. He's already providing, but he will, without your extraneous effort, worship this, worship that, and all of your debts are satisfied. And he says so in the Gita. Exactly that. He says, Ananyas chindayam domam yejana parupasate tesha nitya viyuktanam yoga kshema bahamyaham. Just after he's saying that those who worship me indirectly by worshiping the demigods, they may go to heaven if they do it right, and they enjoy like anything. But then after some time they come down again here to this world of death, so they don't really make any progress. It's actually a diversion. But those who worship me solely, I give what they need. I provide their yoga and shema. Yoga and shema is what we're always looking for. Yoga are the things we need for sustenance. Food, shelter, clothing, heat, like that. And shema is general welfare. Their good fortune, you see? I provide that for them. So what else do we need? But we have to recognize Krishna as the supreme supplier. That's the attitude of gratitude. And when you think about it, gratitude is like close to love. It's a preliminary mood. If you love somebody, a child is so appreciative of the parents. They're giving so much of them, right, to the child. So the child gives back, you know, this sense of love. So gratitude, recognizing Krishna's position as the supplier, is a very important first step in bhakti. And when we chant, if you chant Hare Krishna, and if someone isn't chanting, they should take it up. You can feel that mood. If you chant to Krishna with that sense of dependence and helplessness. We have this verse again from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Trinana Pisunicena Torodi Vasahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtani Eksadahari. In this verse, he's taught us the proper attitude for successful chanting. And the first thing is we have to feel very humble. Is it? Pride is the enemy of bhakti. We have to really feel, yes, from moment to moment, I'm depending on Krishna. My heart can stop at any time, right? There can be an earthquake. So many things that can happen, you know. So I can't do anything about it. So I depend for my sustenance, for my safety, for everything on Krishna. So this should make us very humble and thankful, and then tolerant. We have to tolerate in this world because this is not our home. It's called Dukali Avashashvatam. Means it's temporary. Every situation is temporary and full of difficulties. Dukkha means unhappiness. Inevitably they come. So what can we do? We have to tolerate. The idea in yoga is to maintain its equilibrium. This is one of the basic principles of yoga practice, whether it's bhakti yoga or any practice. And that's why in the second chapter, Krishna talks about this. He says, Stita prajna. Stita prajna means steady intelligence. And that means not being swept away by the positive and negative things in this world. If there's something very pleasing to the senses, then, don't lose your composure and understand that this is temporary, this is diverting me from Krishna, rather chant Hare Krishna. If there's something unpleasing to your senses, understand this will also pass. Agama paino nityas. Even in the Bible, they say this is how you tolerate. And this too shall pass. Right? That's from the Bible. So, that steadiness of mind can be there when we're tolerant. And also giving honor to the honorable and not wanting any honor for ourselves. But that sense of dependence on Krishna, this is very good. It means that we can remember at every moment of our lives how thankful we should be to Krishna for his benediction. In the Upanishads, it's described that Nityo Nityanam, Chaitanas Chaitananam, Eko Bahunam Yoga Dadati Kama. That there's an infinite number of conscious beings, right? Chaitananam, and we're all eternal. We're never born and we'll never die. But out of all of those eternal conscious beings, there's one special being. What is it? How can you tell who it is? The one who's supplying all the necessities for the others. The one who's supplying all the necessities for the others. So, that means all the others should be grateful. We should recognize the supplier. And bhakti means to take some of that, whatever we have at our disposal, and offer it back in gratitude to the Lord. When we make these offerings to Jagannath, now Jagannath is Jagannath, he's the Lord of the universe. What does he need for our little lamp and our little fruit? He doesn't need it. We need to offer it. He allows us to offer it to reestablish that relationship of gratitude and love that we've forgotten. It's covered. So all of bhakti is like that. This whole festival, Jagannath, this is a little tiny planet we're living on, in a little tiny continent, in a little city called Toronto. When you look at it in perspective of the universe, Jagannath, after all, means universe. Jagat is universe. So Jagannath, he doesn't need us to do this festival. He's happy though when we make the effort to make a nice festival in honor of him. It's for our benefit. And so much of it is in honoring his gifts and offering them back. It's just like a little child, right? A little child goes to the store and spends $5 in order to get his mother a birthday present. Some little scarf, say, right? And then she wraps it up and Mommy, this is on your birthday. I love you, right? It happens all the time. Give the scarf. The mother probably has the scarf already. It doesn't matter. But it doesn't matter. Where did the $5 come from? From the mother, from the father. You see? So she's giving back to the mother and father, or the mother, what she's already been given. But the mother appreciates like anything. A little tear comes to the eye. Because it's an offering of love. You see? So it's the same way with Jagannath, or Krishna. Everything has come from Krishna. He says, this whole universe has come. All this air, water, fire, whatever you see, even you yourself, are emanated from Krishna. And that's why we have Krishna's qualities in minute degree. We're all persons, right? We have a certain amount of attractiveness, a certain amount of physical beauty, intelligence, love, mobility, all of these different things that make a person. How did we get them? From the original person. There cannot be anything in the effect that's not in the cause. Think of this philosophically a little bit. Yeah? Just like we're all children of some parents. So if scientifically, if you analyze all those genes that we have that go to make up so much of our character and our physical being and whatever, it's coming from the parents. But that's not the source. They're also coming from parents all the way back. So therefore, the original person, the original source, must have the same amount or more personality that we have. Do you understand? Anything that's created. Say this chair. So how did this chair come about? Let's think about it. Somebody had an idea. It has to come from an idea first. And they draw a diagram, they design a chair. It's not that complicated, but it has to happen. And before they make the chair, then you gather the materials, the plastic chair, whatever it is. And on the basis of that idea, that design, then it's produced, maybe one at first, then they mass produce it. So you have so many causes. The first thing is the idea of the creator. You know, or even before that, somebody wants to, you know, make some money, so they, you know, finance it, whatever. So all of the things that go into this chair, the ingredients, the functionality of it, they started out in the mind of a person, and then you say, well, what about the ingredients? Okay, the ingredients are also coming ultimately from the earth, and you take all of those causes, and you end up with this effect. But there's nothing in this chair that you can't trace back. You know? Everything in this chair once had existed previously. And the essential element of it is really a person had an idea that they always should have a chair that supports people when they sit. You see? And you can use that for anything. And why just the inanimate things? Why not the trees? That tree is much more complicated than this chair. So therefore there has to be the idea of a tree. And indeed, we find in the Vedic literature, like Bhagavad Gita, that this whole world is a reflection of the real world. There are beautiful trees in the spiritual world. There are people like us, but not, then again, not like us. There's not bodies made of blood and bone and all of this stuff that we got. That we always want to forget. That's the real person, pure spirit, pure spiritual person. You see? So the knowledge of this and the means to realize the knowledge, this is the greatest gift that Krishna has given us. And he gives it directly through books like Bhagavad Gita, and he gives it through media of like great devotees and other books that are written by them. And they're all teaching us the same essential message, is that don't think that this life in which you're absorbed wholly in matter and its very infinite varieties is everything. It's really unreal in a sense. You know, you've heard of this. I read about this movie, The Matrix, right? The Matrix had a lot of, I think the one who wrote that might have read some literature that we put. Because the whole idea is that it's not what it seems. This world is not what it seems. It seems to be real, it seems to be the most important thing, but haven't you noticed how it always changes? Whatever, any, both positive and negative, any good thing that comes to you. You meet your mate, the marriage, it's a love affair, will happily ever after. That's the idea, right? Isn't that the idea in every marriage, that yes, we'll live happily ever after? But okay, and you're in bliss. You're in bliss for some time. But then things change. You change, she changes, the situation changes. There can be tragedy, it happens every day. Some disease or even death disrupts the situation. And then time goes on, and it heals, and then other situations come, and this is the way life goes. That's one of the blessings of getting older. I can remember so many years, I'm not 65 years old. So, go back, I can remember when I'm 7, 8, 9, and in those days, I had a certain view of the world. It was a much, I'm looking at people's knees mostly, but it's still a view. And what is important? And what do I, and if I don't get what I think is really important, I cry, and all of these things. So a whole different emotional structure and everything. And that was my world at that time. And then I grew older, gradually, and all of those concerns and the body changes, that's also left behind. And then more concerns. And then when I was 19, before that, 16, 17, 18, 19, the most important thing in my whole life was trying to stop the Vietnam War. Remember that war? Crazy war. It was started on a lie, and 58,000 American men died, and over 1 million Vietnamese died for no reason. It was horrible. And I think, this is my life, I got to do something about this. I was aware of what was going on. And that went on for years and years and years. And eventually, 1968, Nixon got elected, and all of those demonstrations and everything, we said, oh, we failed. And I just got, there's no meaning, there's no purpose. And then that was my reality. No more hope. Is it? And this is how my life developed. Now, keep going on. You know, gradually after a while, I met the devotees, and my whole life changed. And I felt, oh, this is really what's important. It's not, it's eternally important. This is the real revolution. Because whether it's today, tomorrow, or a million years from now, what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita is absolutely true. Not so these books of relative philosophy, what to speak of the newspapers. You know, Vietnam War is all forgotten. You know, people have been born and died and never even heard of it. You know, so what happened? How is that, all of my concerns at that time and all of that activity and all that effort, how is it any more important than the dream I had last night? In that dream, if you know, it's hard to remember, but you say you have a vivid dream. There are people there, you're a different person, different environment, different concerns. When you're in the dream, it's the most important thing, and your day life is completely forgotten. Right? Doesn't mean anything. But now that we're in the day, we say, oh, that was just a dream. But I'm telling you, my life, and you know, when I was 18, 19, 20, is just as much of a dream as that last night. And for each one of us who had a life, previous life and lives, we've all forgotten that. We've all forgotten it. Unless anyone is here happen to be a Jati Smara and you can remember your previous life, I doubt it, right? But that's the first lesson of Gita. You're eternal. That means that you had a life before. Now you see what's going on here, that in our illusion, we're taking our present situation as the all in all. This is what really is important. I got to get into this university. I'm a junior in high school. That was like, you know, for a whole year, that was the most... And now, you know, it doesn't mean anything. So what means something? What means something is that which doesn't change. That which is steady throughout all of these experiences. And that is the soul. That is the Atma, the knower. And how can we reach that, you know, the true fulfillment of the soul is by reconnecting with the Supreme Soul. And returning to that world that doesn't change. Where there's no past and future. Every day is eternally fresh and new. You know, we should investigate the reality of that. So that's what we should really be grateful for. The most important thing to be grateful for is the knowledge that has been given to us by the great efforts of what we call a parampara. You know, those who can see, they call Tattvadarshi. And they've written down the books like Bhagavad Gita, Vyasadeva, of course, you know, and these knowledge gives us, this is the only window to reality. Otherwise, everything is all relative. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Aham Savasya Prabhavo Mattak Savam Bhavartate. Very simple statement. It says all this that you see and everything you don't see, it's all coming from me. I've created it all. The wise who understand this fully, they worship me with all their hearts. How? Madchitta, Madgata Prana, Bodhayanta Parasparam. They become conscious of me. That's the first thing. Place their minds on it. And they try to dedicate their lives to my service. Because we're living now with these senses and with this mind that takes us away from Krishna. That's part of our illusion, is it? So we have to use the, you know, it's like a judo thing. All right, we got the senses in mind, we're going to act with them. All right, so use that senses in mind and use that whatever facility you have to connect to Krishna rather than to disconnect from Krishna. That's the art of bhakti. That's the art of Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada gave it to us whole through his books, which he just translated from previous scholars, like Rupa Goswami gave us the Nectar of Devotion. It's a manual for bhakti, what to do, what not to do, you know, in order to awaken this eternal consciousness. Bhagavad Gita, of course, with the commentary, you know, perfect philosophy. So Krishna goes on. These are the essential 4 verses of Bhagavad Gita. We should be so grateful. The attitude of gratitude for the holy name, for the gifts. So he says they worship me by thinking of me, dedicating their life to me, and discussing me, just like this, meeting, chanting Hare Krishna. And then what happens? To those who are thus dedicating their lives to me with devotion, I give them the intelligence from within by which they can come to me. Don't forget, Krishna is within everyone's heart as Super Soul. And he's giving us intelligence now, because we want it, how to work in this world. But he'll also give us the intelligence how to come close to him if we want that. So we have to try to cultivate that. And then he says, out of my mercy, out of compassion, I destroy the darkness of ignorance in their heart with the lamp of knowledge. So that's the greatest gift that we can be given. And that gift culminates in the greatest treasure, Prema Dana. Prema Dana means the treasure of love for God. Now what's so valuable about that? Well, two things. We can go all the way back down to how we think of the criteria of what's good and bad in this world. Well, what's good in this world, in our present estimation, is that which increases my happiness and decreases my unhappiness. Everyone's looking for that, even the little animals and ants. Simple axiom, right? This is what we do. If there's something that, if it's too hot, we try to cool it. Right? We can take jump into the lake or get air conditioning. If it's too cold, we heat it. If we're hungry, we eat, right? So this is our constant meditation. So the general principle is that which can increase our happiness and decrease our unhappiness. But unfortunately in this world, we find that despite our greatest efforts, sometimes our happiness is decreased and our unhappiness is increased. And there's nothing we can do about it, Now it's beautiful weather, but this is like 1 out of 7. Every time I've come here, 1 year, the whole Sunday was completely rained out. And there was nothing we could do about it. On that day, Indra was, playing a joke. He was actually, whatever. The point is, we're at the mercy of these higher things. So, bhakti, prema, love for Krishna, increases your happiness unlimitedly and decreases your unhappiness down to 0. Unhappiness down to 0 means liberation. It means no material body, purely spiritual. That's that's a negative thing. It means no more suffering. What about the positive? That's the prema side. That's the loving exchanges with Krishna. If you think about it, what is life, really, where do we find any happiness in life? Through loving exchange. I may be a billionaire, but if I'm lonely and everybody hates me, I'm the most miserable person in the world. You know what? They did a survey. They always, doing polls. Who's the happiest? Which country has the happiest people? They came out number 1? Bangladesh. Who would ever have thought? So much poverty, and strife. How is that? Why? Because they have all of these very stable, extended families, and mostly agrarian. People grow up on the farm. Simple life with a lot of love. Takes a village. The child is there, so many aunties, so many, the grandma. This is where happiness comes. You may not have much, but if you have people who love you and you feel secure, then you're happy. Happiness doesn't mean, as we know, material thing. That may bring temporary happiness, but it also brings misery. So prema, we have to understand that that's exactly where the happiness comes, from that relationship with Krishna and his devotees. And there's no tinge of negativity. Number 1, it's permanent. It doesn't end. Any friendship, any love, you love, your children. I mean, that's the most intense, really. A mother's love for the child is most pure, most selfless. But the child grows up, and goes away, or something. Eventually it dissipates. So that never dissipates. If you want to love Krishna as a child, you can do that. You can be the eternal on the level of Mother Yashoda. You can always have that. Wonder and pleasure of seeing Krishna perform his childhood pastimes. That's what prema does. And so, this is very esoteric and mystical and mysterious. And so we think, well, it sounds nice, but but it's really, this is reality. This is reality. So we should be grateful on 2 levels. One is that Krishna is maintaining us, their every breath, and therefore we should offer our prasadam, offer our food to Krishna and take it. As he wants. And on a more important level, we should be grateful that Krishna has arranged for us to learn about this science and to send his great devotees like Prabhupada to arrange that we can practice it, and have these wonderful festivals. This is a gift. Nobody's charging you to come and walk and see the deity. Jagannath has come out of his temple so that anyone can see the Lord personally and get blessed. You know, how grateful and eternally grateful we should be. So I've kind of gone on. I've lost track of time. What time is it? Oh, it's perfect. Okay, so that was the idea, right? And we have some written questions already? Okay. So, first of all, in advance, I'd like to thank those of you, maybe you're still here, who wrote these questions. How can we give religious education to our children so that they become Krishna conscious? Well, that's a big question. There's no one way to do it. The first prerequisite is we have to be Krishna conscious. That's the first thing. We are, especially for small children, the parents are the examples. If the parents, love each other and it's a stable home, that's the most important thing. You know, but even adjunct to that is that they also be devotees of Krishna. It is said in the Bhagavatam that one should not become a parent if you can't deliver your children from birth and death. That means that as parents, we need to be devotees and understand the science of devotional service. So that's the first thing. The other is that create a home environment where Krishna is everywhere. He's on the walls with the pictures, the sounds that are vibrating of Krishna conscious. It's not easy. This is a world of screens. The little screens and the bigger screens and the big screen TVs. These are all pouring forth things that take our mind away from Krishna. So this is the hardest part of being a parent today, to somehow direct that where the child is becoming interested in the images, the sounds, the pastimes of Krishna. So it's difficult. And in some Krishna conscious communities, we actually have schools called Gurukul schools where the children are raised in Krishna consciousness along with academic studies. So it's not easy. What does it mean to be equipoised? Yeah, the word is equipoised, not posed, but the idea is that we can experience in our lives that there's so many things that can knock us off our game, so to speak, disturb our minds, right? We get a call from the credit collector, and right away we have so much anxiety. Oh my goodness, I didn't pay the bill, I can't pay the bill. There's so many ups and downs, and mostly now there's downs, but they're both sides. So equipoise means, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, he says, so this pragya pratishtita, pragya means your intelligence, and pratishtita means exactly equipoise, means fixed, you see? So here he's saying that don't become too attached to the things in this world. See, understand that it's all temporary. You see? And if you get something auspicious, something that looks very favorable, don't lose your equipoise. You understand, okay, it's favorable, but that's also temporary. And then if you could be equipoised in that, then when things unfavorable come, you'll be able to tolerate. You see? It literally means that if someone insults you, don't lose your cool and go, ballistic. They're dealing with you on a relative level. They don't understand who you really are. Now this equipoise becomes practical when you develop your Krishna consciousness. It means that you have a kind of an internal gyroscope. What do people know? What does it matter what's happening in this instrument? This person is insulting me. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Much more important than responding to this attack on my false ego, is hard, I know, is to maintain my remembrance of Krishna. You see? Here's a little paradigm. In the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, I highly recommend this book. At the end of the chapter, Arjuna is saying, he says, my dear Krishna, what is it that impels us, practically, without our even will, to act sinfully, to act against the laws of God? In other words, why do we lose our cool, and act in a way that we later regret? Oh my God, I knew I shouldn't have punched him out, or, why did I, do this? And Krishna answers, oh, it's karma. Kama esha, krodha esha, rajoguna samudvaha, mahashano, mahapapa vidinam vayana. He says it is lust, it is material desire that infects our mind, our intelligence, and our senses, that sometimes takes over and covers our good intelligence. It covers our knowledge. So we forget, and we act in ways that we later regret. This happens to us, right? Kama and krodha, lust and anger, rage. So this is he says, this is the greatest enemy in this world. It's not that, Arjun standing on a battlefield. Try to see the context. He's on the battlefield, and he's faced with, thousands of enemy soldiers. But Krishna says, those aren't your real enemies. The real enemy's in here. It's your material desire. It's your material desire, and it's concomitant, which is anger and illusion. That is really your enemy. And so, and then he analyzes. Yes, it takes over not only the mind and intelligence, but the senses. How do we know? It's obvious. Someone becomes addicted to alcohol or tobacco, and then they say, oh my God, I'm ruining my life. I feel I can't, my health is being, my marriage is being destroyed by the alcohol. And yet, when the opportunity comes, the impulse to drink and smoke is there. Okay, tomorrow I'll quit, right? Isn't it? That means your senses have been overtaken by this obsession, if you will, addiction, to a self-destructive substance. It didn't start out that way. You want to have fun. Take a little nip, you drink, but then it gets away from you. See? So the same thing happens also on a subtle level, with ideas and minds, relationships. So mind, intelligence, and senses can be overwhelmed by karma. So to be equipoised means to conquer this enemy known as lust. And you can do that by yoga. By practicing yoga, especially in this age, mantra yoga, you can sublimate these desires. Just to think of prasadam. I was a meat eater one time. I wouldn't think twice about going down to McDonald's, Yeah, back in the 40 years ago, way before I joined. But then when I met the devotees, I became acquainted with prasadam. I wouldn't think of it now. I have no desire, it's gone, you see? So I'm equipoised in that regard. And that can come in everything. So that's how to remain equipoised. By becoming Krishna conscious, we can be getting equipoised. Alright, so the questions are coming. I'll try to do it a little quicker. What is the meaning of dyeing the face? Okay, this is an easy one. We don't dye the face, we paint the face with the tilak. I assume you mean that? I don't know who asked the question. So the tilak, this is made of clay, sacred clay. And it's a way of anointing the body and recognizing it as a temple of God. And the kind of tilak, which is what's called upward tilak, this means that we're servants of Krishna. If you see this way, there's service of Shiva. So if you go to India, you'll see where the tilak is placed and what color it designates what group they belong to. So basically, the basic answer is by anointing the body as a temple of God. That's what the meaning of tilak is. How can we control our mind from inner chattering and while chanting the Hare Krishna mantra? This is a difficult one. So whatever you do during the rest of the time, you're going to experience that when you sit down to chant. We do two kinds of chanting, and we'll be displaying them a little later in the yoga booth there. So this is one kind, collective chanting, dancing with the drums, and the other is meditative chanting on beads called japa. So the question I think has to do with the japa chanting. The mind is meant to be focused on the sound of the holy name. It's a meditation. But we find the mind is not cooperating. It's going here and going there. So how can we control the mind? Well, as Krishna says, Shanai Shanai Upadamaid, from wherever the mind wanders, draw it back. We have powers of concentration, right? We have some powers of concentration. So we have to, say, oh, no, let me hear the holy name. Let me hear the holy name. And if you lead a Krishna conscious lifestyle, then even if the mind goes away, it'll go to some Krishna thought. So it's not so bad, you see? It'll go to something about Krishna. But ideally, the idea is to simply hear Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So kirtan and japa work together. If you spend a good half hour or more, chanting with the beat and dancing, the whole body is involved, the ears are involved, the voice is involved, the mind. You have to think of the holy name. People sometimes say, "Oh, I couldn't get that mantra out of my mind." That's good. Right? Or just pass us by on the street. So that process of Krishnaizing your life through basically chanting the holy name, then the mind eventually surrenders and it becomes easier and easier to hear and to focus on the chanting. It becomes sweeter, let's put it that way. If you see something that is so attractive to you, nobody has to encourage you, please keep looking at that. Oh no, I like her, I like him, definitely. You see? In other words, the mind is naturally attractive. So we should know, for a fact, that Krishna is the most attractive. That's what his name means. His most attractive form, personality, he's the funniest, he's the most skillful, he's the most loving, everything that attracts us in a person. So if we simply come in touch with him, and he has invested his energies in that holy name, so the name of Krishna is Krishna. And when we hear carefully and we bring the mind back hearing, then the name becomes more and more attractive, and eventually it's not difficult to become absorbed because it's most attractive. So it's a science. And I'm sorry, every year I ask them, can you please move the seminar tent far away from the main tent? And every year they don't do it. And that's why it's a little bit hard to concentrate, but that's what we got. I'm sorry. Hare Krishna. The Q&A tent is better situated. Okay, too many gods in this world, too many religions preaching for them. From your lecture, I understand the value of Krishna consciousness. My question is Krishna equal to Vishnu or Ram, or, there's an or at the end. Krishna is not equal to Vishnu or Ram. There's a concept that you learn by reading Prabhupada's books. One and different. One and different, Just like the sun and the sunshine. This is a favorite example. If you're just in your ordinary parlance, you open the window, you would say, well, it's dark in here, can you please let the sun shine through? Well, the sun itself is not going to come through the window, otherwise we'll burn, right? You mean the sunshine, because sunshine is how we experience the sun. The sun is infinitely, for all practical purposes, hot, right? And light. If you get close to the sun, there's too much heat, too much light. But we're so far away from the sun, the rays of the sun also have some heat and some light. And when they're massed, they give us the pleasing heat and light that we're familiar with in the sun. So the sunshine is one with and different from the sun. You see? It's not the sun, but there's a oneness there because the sun has no meaning without the sunshine. You see what I'm saying? So in the same way, we ourselves are one and different with Krishna. We are one in quality. Krishna is a person, we're a person. We have activities, he has activities. We have likes and dislikes, so does he. He has a place to live, we have a place to live. But we're minute. We're like the little drop of the seawater that's also salty. So we're also conscious persons, and he's the perfectly, infinitely conscious super person. So, in the same way, the gods, Indra, Chandra, Surya, they're also one with Krishna, but they're more powerful than we are. So they're given more responsibility, you see? But they're not Krishna. Whatever powers Indra has or Surya has are bestowed by Krishna. Same with us. We have smaller powers, so we're not gods. But we can become the sun god if we, act in a certain way. Because the sun god is also a soul, or Brahma is a soul. So, Krishna is non-different from Vishnu.